At a high level for me is really somebody who's looking to, develop and grow, doesn't have all the answers, and is willing to continue to improve themselves and hone their craft.
What is it you don't like about the industry at the moment, and what do you think needs to change with the financial advisory industry to get it to where it needs to get to in the next 5 years?
Advisor is a very rewarding career, but at the end of the day, when you're sitting with families, if you've been doing this long enough, you come to realize it's not about the money. Very little has to do with about the money. People want to know they're okay. They want to know how they can utilize that money to drive and bring joy to their lives. So we decided to shift the conversation and spend the majority of it there. What brings them joy?
Hi, welcome everyone. I'm thrilled today to have Larry Sprung, founder and lead wealth advisor, managing director at Mitlin Financial. 3 decades of experience in financial planning, but you wouldn't think so looking at his youthful looks. So blends technical expertise with a passion for making finance personal, meaningful, and joy-filled. So really excited. I think high performance isn't always about how much money you make. It's about lots of other things. Best-selling author of Financial Planning Made Personal, How to Create Joy and Mindset for Success. Host of Mitlin Money Mindset podcast. So he's an expert in podcasts. So we're expecting big things today, Larry. But what I also love, deeply committed to mental health advocacy, served for 12 years on the National Board of American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. And together with his wife, Denise, has helped raise more than 1.7 million through the Keith Milano Memorial Fund, which is an unbelievable and something that makes me emotional just hearing that. So yeah, Larry, I know that's a big introduction now. I hope you don't mind, but there's lots of good things to say about you. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. And just so you know, it's almost 3 decades, not just there yet, but I appreciate it.
Well, you're looking well for it. And I love the, obviously the work you're doing outside as well. So, I mean, the first question, obviously, anyone that knows Larry, there's lots of joys associated to everything you do. What inspired you originally to come up with joy being such an integral part of your world?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the thing is this, for me, family's always been of utmost importance. And just to give you a high level, I lost my mom at the age of 47. She passed away at that age, and it was the day after my 23rd birthday. So, that impacted me. And then, several years later, we lost my brother-in-law, Keith Milano, who you mentioned earlier, who we have the Memorial Fund for. He died by suicide in 2004. So those 2 events really reinforced my drive and importance surrounding family. So about 5 years ago or so, when we were launching the podcast, my wife, Denise, who's an integral part of the business and our chief marketing officer, said, you really need to have a question that ties in with all of your guests. And I was like, okay, great. I was like, figure it out, come up with a question and let me know. And she came up with the question, what did you do today that brought you joy? And that really changed everything, because people started lighting up when we were asking them that question. We started talking about it. We put it on shirts and people were staring at them in airports and at conferences. And people would just come up to me and tell me about their story about what brought them joy that day. And right then and there, we knew we were onto something. And like I said, family has been always important, and having joy with the family. Now we had a way to, ask about it and really lean into it. And that's what we've done ever since that question came about. We've now integrated that into everything that we do, because, being a financial advisor is a very rewarding career. But at the end of the day, when you're sitting with families, if you've been doing this long enough, you come to realize it's not about the money. Very little has to do with about the money. People want to know they're okay. They want to know how they can utilize that money to drive and bring joy to their lives. So we decided to shift the conversation and spend the majority of it there. What brings them joy? What are they looking to do to bring them joy? And we'll figure out the money later. That's something we have to do as a financial advisory firm. But at the end of the day, we really want to have those more deep conversations about what brings them joy. So that's a long-winded way to tell you that, really the podcast came up with that question, and we've really leaned into it ever since. And it's been transformational for our practice.
Fantastic. So I have to ask, what brings you joy then, Larry? What brings you, what's brought you joy today, and what generally brings you joy?
Yeah, so I've had a lot of joyful events over the last couple of days. A few days ago, my son was playing in New Jersey. He had a hockey game, which a lot of people who know me know hockey's an integral part of my life. And my wife and I drove down to southern New Jersey. We had dinner with my older son and his girlfriend. And then we all went to watch my younger son play. And then we got to all hang out together after the game. That to me is like the most joyful day I could possibly have, because we spent time with those that were most important to me. So that's a really great example of what brings me joy. And, like I said, people who know me know I'm, traveling a lot on the weekends. And a lot of that has to do with seeing my boys and spending time with them. And that really brings me a whole lot of joy, spending time with Denise and being able to spend that time with our kids, doing whatever is really joyful.
Love that. So you've obviously had lots of success, Larry, but you've also obviously put a lot of time into family as well. How have you managed to build a business, a thriving business, while maintaining balance, presence, purpose, all these different things? How have you managed to do it? Because it is a really difficult task to be a good family man, good businessman, all these different things. How have you done that? And are there any tips or advice you can give me or any?
Yeah,
or our listeners?
Yeah, I mean, you have to be intentional about what you want to do and know what your why is. And very early on, my why, and still today, is family. That's my why. So, my business, the business the way it is today is not the business the way it was, even 7-10 years ago. It's changed. I'd say we're in Mitlin 2.0 now. And what I mean by that is we as a family, Denise and I, she's been in the business now for about 4 or 5 years full time. But prior to that, we've always had conversations that, intentionally the business from when we first started in 2004, it was really a lifestyle practice. It was me and one other team member. I didn't want to be big. I didn't want to have to be out every night. I didn't want to have to work 90 hours a week, because I wanted to be there to take my kids to hockey practice, go to their games on the weekends. And then essentially what ended up happening is around 2020, same timing as the pandemic, my older son started college. My younger son made a decision to go away to boarding school at the age of 15 to follow his passion around hockey. And my wife and I, Denise, we were, finding ourselves as bird launchers, because we were sitting at home and it was just us now. So I was like, now's the time to really, propel this business to the next level. And over the last 5 years, we've 4X'd the practice. We now have 6 team members that are part of our team. So going back, I think you have to be intentional about it. I mean, I took flack early on from colleagues, coworkers, friends. They were like, hey, why are you not putting the pedal to the metal on this business? You're an entrepreneur. And I was like, well, if being an entrepreneur means I have to burn 90 hours a week working, then I don't know that I want to be an entrepreneur. I thought being an entrepreneur afforded me the ability to do kind of things the way I wanted to and how I wanted to and at the speed I wanted to. And that's what I was exercising. So there were people that were like blown away. They didn't understand it. What do you mean you want to keep it slow? And I said, this is what I want to do, because if I grow too fast, I'm not going to be able to. For example, when the kids were young, I took off Fridays during the summer, June, July, and August. There are families still today that think I'm not in on Fridays. But I was like, I created this business so that it could serve me and what I was looking to get out of life and be able to do that. And then that changed, quite a bit in 2020, and we've put the pedal to the metal and we've moved forward, as I said, like Mitlin 2.0. But going back to your listeners, I think they have to figure out what their why is, determine what's important to them, and then build everything to serve that why. And, keep in mind, just because you set a why 10 years ago doesn't mean that that's going to be the same why that's serving you today. I think it's something that you have to revisit every couple of years and say, hey, is this why still my why, or has it changed a little bit? And then, reorient whatever you're doing to focus in on that why. And I think if you follow that and you follow your heart, good things will happen and you'll be able to achieve what you set out to achieve.
I love your view on life. I love that, and I love the entrepreneurial conversation there about what an entrepreneur is. Like you say, surely it's the ability to do what you want when you like. I guess it's giving you the decisions that are your decisions rather than other people's and things you have to do. I guess so. That's an interesting way of looking at it. I like that. So when you look at the market, I know we met at Future Proof recently, Larry. You see lots of advisors. What does high performance mean to you, I guess, when you look at advisors? What does a high performing financial advisor, what traits do they have, and what does high performance mean?
Yeah, I think there's two different ways to look at that, right? I think a high performer is going to look at themselves one way, and then somebody from the outside may look at a high performer another way. And I'll give you an example of that, right? When I was talking about building the business early on and I was taking time and keeping things small, if you were asking somebody else that question about me, whether they thought I was a high performer or not, they might have said to you, well, I don't know that he is because he's not going hard and fast. So I think, you have to look at the individual and kind of learn, hey, what is their why and what is high performing for them, right? You have to learn what's most important, because if I'm thinking that it should be one thing, but their why is steering them in another direction, then we're completely misaligned, right? And there's no right or wrong. It may not be a good fit in my view, but they may be fulfilling what their high performance characteristics are at that time. So I think you have to understand what that person is looking for. But at a high level for me is really somebody who's looking to, develop and grow, doesn't have all the answers, and is willing to continue to improve themselves and hone their craft, right? And be willing and able to put in the time, effort, and energy to be successful. And, I think that one of the things I do is I work with each one of my stakeholders to really figure out what's in it for them. What are they looking to achieve, and try to help them work towards those. Because I don't want to put my definition of high performance on them. I want to help them work towards their best vision of what high performance may be for them. Now, with that said, there may be times where they may think high performance is here, and I may, as somebody from the outside, say, hey, you know what? I really think you can get up to here. And then it's a matter of challenging them, to see if that's something they're interested in exploring. And if they are, trying to help elevate them to that next level. But there are others that, like me early on, that might be happy and very joyful here and just want to stay there. So I think it's a double-edged sword to some degree, right? It's like beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I think high performance can be in the eye of the beholder as well.
I like that philosophy. And I was going to ask, actually, because obviously you're talking about Mitlin 2.0 now, installing your the beliefs, I guess, and also the way that you look at the world, which obviously I respect a lot. How do you pass that through the business and get that culture within the business, and will you have to do anything different with Mitlin 2.0 as you get bigger and larger, and how do you do it, and how are you going to do it? Because it's not easy, is it? I'd imagine.
No, we follow and utilize, Traction and the EOS system, which is super helpful. We have a set of core values that we pretty much developed as a team. And they're not just words sitting on a wall or on a form or on a Word document. Basically, we recite our core values every week at our level 10 meeting. And we also, a member of the team gives an example of somebody who exhibited or some event that exhibited one of those core values. Brilliant. So it's something we're living by and we're exemplifying. And it's also a methodology to, when somebody isn't performing at their best and you kind of know, and maybe they're not living up to one of those core values, it's not a matter of me saying, hey, you're doing this right or you're doing this wrong, but it's a matter of questioning, hey, is this really living up to our responsive and proactive communication core value? Do you think what you're doing right now is living up to that? And let them make that decision. And many times they're like, you know what, thanks for the reset and the reminder, and they get back on track. So I think that's how we're doing it and integrating it and being forthright and open about what's going on in the firm as an organization as a whole is super important. And, as you mentioned, as we continue to grow in this Mitlin 2.0, as you say, that's probably the biggest challenge we have is maintaining and continuing that culture. But I will fight it till tooth and nail, because I will not allow any cultural terrorists into our organization. That's the biggest fear. We want people who are a good fit. And the thing that could really disrupt any organization, ours or anybody who's listening, is once you get one of those cultural terrorists in your organization, it's a disaster, and it really just kills everything, and you're going to have to start rebuilding. So we do our darndest to keep them out and make sure that we only let people in who are aligned with our core values.
Yeah. So hiring, I guess, and making sure you get the right. When you're doing that, do you think that that's down to beliefs that people have? So they're not going to be a cultural terrorist. They need to have the same sort of view on life. So they could be the best financial advisor in the world, but if they don't see things in a similar way, then they're not going to fit into the business, I guess. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, to some degree. I mean, Tony, you don't want people who all think the same, because then you create this robotic environment,
True.
right?
Yeah.
You want a diversification of ideas and thought, right? But at the same time, I think it comes down to those core beliefs that there has to be alignment there and there has to be fit there. And I think a lot of those core beliefs have really nothing to do with, being a financial advisor. It has to do with how to run a business and being a good person and being a good human being. And those are the traits that we want to make sure that are congruent through everybody. But I think on the thought, the ideas, we embrace having different thought and ideas and different visions, because that only helps us serve all the multitude of families that we serve, because they're not all the same and they're looking for different ideas and they have different ideas themselves. So I think it comes down to those core beliefs and having some of those just foundational ideas being very similar, but everything else having some openness to be different.
Yeah, great. What advice would you give to a young Larry if a young Larry was setting up Mitlin in 2025? What advice would you give to young Larry about how to set up the business? Because it's very different setting up now to obviously back then. But obviously, what advice would you give to young Larry or a young person now who's looking to start their journey setting up a business?
Yeah, so I'm part of the FinServe Foundation. So I mentor usually a college student who's going to be coming out and wanting to get into the profession. So this is something we talk about all the time. And a couple of things I would say are, one, I would say RIA is the way. I don't think broker-dealer world is really the future, and I feel like the RIA is the way. And I think you want to look down that route. Number one. Number two, I know that young folks today, and even myself, it's kind of I'm going to talk a little bit out of two sides of my mouth, but at the same time, I think things have changed. I don't think this business is meant for everybody to go on their own. And, I think there are a lot of opportunities that suggest that that's the way to go. But I think there is a lot of consolidation in our profession. It's going to continue. I think that, as we need to deliver to families, it's more complicated. You need more resources. You need more support, and you need to find a firm or an organization organization where you could plug and play into and really serve the families in the best way. And like we do here, right? People can serve the families how they want. We give them the foundation that we want them to use, but how they're using that, we want them to put in their own personality. So I would think about that in terms of, rather than going out on your own and creating a firm. I think there's so many benefits to joining an existing one. And then lastly, I would say, and this has had a huge impact on my business when we started to lean into it, and it wasn't available when I started, which is social media. Social media is a great way to help get your name out, your reputation, and it's something that takes a long, long time. And, I'll share with you yesterday alone, right? Yesterday, we had 2 new inquiry calls. One of them was somebody that I did some charity. I did a overnight walk in New York City to support suicide prevention. Walk 16 miles or 17 miles from sundown to sunrise all through New York City and Brooklyn. And there was this gentleman that I had met who I was walking with, and we chatted a little bit, very little about what I did for a living, very little bit about what he did, just our lives and his people. And he reached out to me because he has some financial decisions to make. And he reached out to us to have an opportunity. And we've stayed connected since we met that night via social media. So he's seen us. And then the second call we got was somebody that I've known for probably about 15, 16 years. And there was an event going on at his company that he needed to move some money. And he thought of us immediately. And I have some busy days coming up. So I put him in touch with, Jarrell Bland, our associate wealth advisor. And the power of social media, when Jarrell called him back, he was like, "Oh, I know who you are. I see you all over Mitlin Social." That's so great, the point is, get out there on social. It's not going to work immediately, but build up a reputation and, put out there what you're doing, what you're up to. And, over time, it will definitely add value to you and your business.
Great. I mean, you're obviously a natural. Obviously, I'm listening to you communicate. I've seen you talk on stage, all these different things. Were you always that way, Larry? Or have you had to train? Because obviously, we know each other relatively well, I think. But the confidence you show when you're talking, is that something you've had to train? Because that's the challenge with social media: is you've got to be brave, haven't you? You've got to put yourself out there. You've got to put pictures, videos, and it's quite as certainly someone my age, it's just unusual, isn't it? Have you had to train yourself to get so
That's a great question. So I'm going to throw myself under the bus here, Tony. If you go on to our old YouTube channel, the Mitlin Financial YouTube channel, I think we have videos going back like 10 plus years. Watch those videos. I don't watch them anymore. They are awful, horrible, terrible. They're bad. They're bad. And if you look at our new YouTube channel, which is under Larry Sprung, my name, you'll see totally different, totally different than what I was doing 10 or 15 years ago. So the answer is, and quite frankly, I didn't have much and have not had much in the way of what I would call formal training. It was more on the job training and walking through this and kind of watching and listening to what I've done, and also watching and listening some of the best in the business in terms of, going out there and talking and having these conversations. So a lot of it's been self-taught and just trial and error, but you're right. You have to put yourself out there, but there aren't many people. I haven't had anybody call me up and say, "Hey, I'm not doing business with you because I saw that awful video from 12 years ago." I don't hear that. Yeah. So I mean, it's like anything else that you want to be good at, even being in this profession, you have to be willing to get better at it and hone that craft. And if that's a medium that you're going to use and you're confident in, it's something you're going to have to hone over time as well.
Yeah, I like that. So obviously the clients that you've got now and your branding on social media, I'm sure most people that are listening to this will have seen you online in some way or form. What percentage of clients do you think come through social media? I guess obviously we're looking at Mitlin 2.0, so it might be different because you've done more recently, but what percentage of your clients do you think have come through social media or networking, do you think?
Yeah, I would say roughly about a third of all of our new inquiries now are coming through social media.
Fantastic. Yeah.
So it's quite a bit, and that number is growing over time because, and at the end of the day, Tony, it's really hard to tell sometimes what. Why people are coming to you, why they're reaching out, because, they've seen us in different places and you don't know what's getting them over the edge. So the whole point is, right, you want to be in people's feeds. You want to be able to have them see you and learn who you are. Like I say, as they're in the shower, in the morning, and then all of a sudden they have this aha moment that, oh, I want to retire soon. I don't have a plan. Who should I call? You want to be that call. You want to be top of mind for that call, and being out there and showing that stuff is super helpful. And on the flip side, we had a family come out to us, inquired about working with us, and they work with us now. And we asked them how they found out about us, and for the life of them, they could not recall. The wife must have met somebody. They put our name, my name, and the firm's name in the notes section of their phone, and that's all they put in there. They couldn't even remember. They're like, I know I wrote this down like a year ago, but I can't remember who gave me your info. So, at the end of the day, you have to be out there and hope that when they come to the time of decision making, that they reach out to you.
Yeah, I love that. So we spoke a lot about joy and the things you do. Obviously, what is it that you don't like about the industry at the moment, and what do you think needs to change with the financial advisory industry to get it to where it needs to get to in the next 5 years?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest pain points I have, or the biggest challenges I see, are a couple fold. One is, with social media, as good as it is and as well as we use it, it's also opens a Pandora's box for a lot of people to say whatever they want to say without having any credentials. And don't get me wrong, there are some good folks out there that understand and know what they're talking about, even though they don't have credentials. But for every one of those, there's 10 out there that are just talking about things and they're giving a lot of bad advice. So I think that's something that has to get regulated a little bit. Secondly is I think we have to come up with a uniform definition of the word financial advisor, right? Because I think it's very confusing to the public as far as what that means. I'm considered a financial advisor and we do holistic financial planning. We talk about taxes, estate, their family, everything that touches their lives. And at the same vein, there's a financial advisor down the block who's basically selling term, whole life, and disability insurance. And that's it. Not planning, not looking at their whole life. And they're calling themselves financial advisors as well. And not, insurance salesmen or something like that. And there's nothing wrong with being an insurance salesman. But my point is, I think it's very confusing for the investing public to really delineate who's who and what's what. So I think those are the major challenges. And I would say thirdly, technology is changing very quickly. And if you're going to be in this profession and you want to serve as many families as you possibly can in the best way you possibly can, you're going to need to have a really good understanding of technology or a team. And you're going to have either an understanding or a team that's going to be able to vet and help you build your tech stack. And thankfully, we have just that. I'd put our tech stack up against anybody else. And I think that's going to be very important to firms and advisors from this point forward.
Absolutely. I mean, AI is exciting, scary in equal measures, isn't it? I think in terms of what it can do and what it could do, So how are you using AI to help make your life easier? I guess that's the key to AI. I think is making your life easier and making other people's lives easier. How are you using it in your day to day to make your job easier or better or in any way?
Yeah, so I mean, the two of the things that come top of mind are actually three things. One is we have a platform called Holistaplan, which basically reads families' tax returns and gives us planning things that we should be thinking about. We can put out scenarios based upon their tax implications, and taxes are a big part of somebody's financial plan because everything with money has to involve taxes to some degree. So that's making our life easier. Secondarily, we have a platform called Zox, which basically takes notes for all of our meetings. We use it for pre-meeting prep to find out what we need to address and talk about for the actual meeting. And then post-meeting, it pushes everything that we need to do for the family and everything they need to do right to our CRM. So huge time saver there. And then, lastly, we have a thing called Steve 2.0, which is basically our own internal chat GPT, because remember, we're getting a lot of documents from families that have personal identifiable information in it. We don't want to be putting that even into a paid version of chat GPT, because who knows where and what that is going to end, where that's going to end up. So we built, our team has built our own internal platform on chat GPT where we can upload those personally identifiable documents, and it will give us overviews. We can ask questions. We can find out for planning opportunities. And basically, we're using ChatGPT in a way that's safe for the families we serve and, giving us the information that can help us serve them better.
Brilliant. Is it the security element for ChatGPT probably isn't spoken about enough, is it really, I suppose? Because, I don't think there's enough sort of policing from what I see around our education to the world about, what you should and shouldn't be putting in there, whether it comes to personal information. I think it's obviously very relevant to financial advice, as you just said there, but, there's probably not enough education on security or cybersecurity anyways in any walk of life, I guess. But it's crazy. We've got this amazing, scary piece of AI, ChatGPT, and people are putting all sorts of personal information in there with no thought about what's going to happen. So it amazes me at the lack of sort of education, I guess. I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's different if, for example, if I am using ChatGPT for me personally, and I put my own personal information in there to determine whatever, health or finance, whatever, right? I'm doing that on my own, and hopefully I know the risks, but to your point, maybe I don't know the risks, maybe I don't care, and I'm just putting it in there anyway. Yeah. But at least that's me doing it. I think it's a much different story, and we've seen firms go either way. I think it's much different when you're serving a family. They're giving you personalized personal documents. I think we have an inherent responsibility not to put that in that same public domain ChatGPT, because it's not them putting it in. It's now us as their advisor putting it in. I think that leads to very troubling and potentially dangerous things happening. So that's why I think any firm that wants to use those platforms, if they don't have it today, really need to build those out so they have the platform to use, but use it in a safe environment that family doesn't have to worry about their information getting out there. Because I know there are a lot of firms out there that really haven't talk to their advisors or said anything about, hey, you shouldn't or cannot use your regular chat GPT. And I think that's problematic. I know advisors that are using that. And quite frankly, I don't feel comfortable with it, now that we have our own internal Steve 2.0, because Steve knows everything. We are using that, and it's much safer, and we're controlling it. So it's much better.
And who came up with the name Steve?
So it's a long story. So we're part of Carson Group, and I'll give him a shout out. There's a gentleman by the name of Steve Sinowicki, who is the head trainer for all things Carson. And basically, prior to Steve 2.0, if you didn't know how to do something or you needed help with something, you could call Steve, and if nobody else knew, Steve knew. So when they created the GPT, they decided to basically memorialize him and name it after him, so that now he could take less phone calls and we could just put it in online and get the info we need.
That's fantastic. Yeah. So just I know you've been on the TV this morning, Larry, and you've come straight to here. So we'll finish soon, because I know you're a busy man. But what does the future look like for Larry, for Mitlin then, and where are you going, and what are you trying to achieve, and why would people join you in that journey?
So I think that for us, talking to advisors, the next iteration for us and the website's up and running right now. If you go to joyfuladvisor.com, you can pre-register for the webinar we're going to be putting out. Essentially, as we've talked about joy and how we've implemented that into our practice, it's really led to record growth and transformation to our business. Last year, for example, where the average firm grew about 3% based upon net new assets. We grew about 24%, so significantly higher than those average firms out there. And a lot of that has to do with our joyful, the stance we're taking and how we're starting from a place of joy rather than a place of numbers. And we're going to be sharing that with other advisors to show them how how we've implemented in our practice, how we've used it, and how we've led it to record growth. And obviously, if they want and can do that on their own, they can certainly take that information and use it as their own. But at the same time, if they want to start implementing it, have the structure and the capabilities and the technology and all the things that I've talked about today, obviously there's the opportunity for them to join us and serve families and in a joyful way with the rest of our team and, create joy not only for the families we serve, but for the firm as well.
Brilliant. There's a real push in it. Obviously, I recruited in the UK and the US. The focus and the push in the US to do it on your own and not part of a business is so completely different to the UK. And there's something beautiful about that in the American dream and pushing the entrepreneurial spirit. But it also is, in a way, like you say, not everyone's suited to going on their own, are they? It's not easy at all. But so it's always amazed me, the push and the difference in the UK is people would very rarely go on their own because that's probably culturally different, but it's like you say, it doesn't suit everyone, and having a good environment where you've got all the tech and the support, is a good thing for a lot of people, isn't it?
Yeah, listen, I'm all about being an entrepreneur, right?
Of course.
But at the same time, there's a lot of things, and I made the same mistakes when I went out on my own, and I share this with people all the time. You don't realize how involved setting up and being able to serve families is, and I think today with technology and other things and things being more complicated, it makes it more difficult to do that in a meaningful way. I think you can have that entrepreneur if you find the right organization, you can flex that entrepreneurial muscle within a greater organization and have all those tools readily available for you. So you don't have to go, putting all those things together. I think it's just a bit more challenging now than it was at one time. And, listen, it could be right for the right people. And, I think the last thing I would say about this is, if you ever read like the E-Myth or you've heard those stories, you go into being a financial advisor, and a lot of people do that because they want to work with families, give advice and guidance, and just do that. And what ends up happening, is you end up doing a lot of other things, right? You end up doing administrative work. You end up doing compliance work. You end up doing HR work. There are all these things that probably when you started, you didn't think about. Now, if you did plan for that, you're much better off than a lot of other people. But if you just want to be an advisor and work with families, and that's really what juices you up every day, I assure you that might be what you're doing early on as you launch in the profession on your own. But in very short order, if you are successful, you're going to find yourself not doing those things a lot more than you were a year or two prior. And that's why I say sometimes it's better off to partner up or, work with another organization, because then you can really guard what you enjoy doing most for a longer period of time.
Brilliant. You've touched on it already there. So I normally ask guests at the end any books that they would recommend to any advisors looking to develop or better themselves. I know you mentioned one there. Are there any books that you would recommend to people looking to upskill there or change their mindset?
Yeah, so I would say there are three. I would read Traction by Gino Wickman, really eye-opening, it's the entrepreneur's operating system. It's an operating system designed and developed for entrepreneurs. 2 is Dan Sullivan and Ben Hardy, Gap and the Gain. I think a lot of entrepreneurs, whether you're in this business or another business, we get sucked into always looking at how far we are from where we want to be. Yeah. And we don't take enough time looking back at the gain that we had. So a real eye-opening book, easy read, Gap and the Gain. And then lastly, also a Dan Sullivan and Ben Hardy book, Who Not How. Instead of figuring out how to do everything, find a who that can do it for you and lean into that and delegate. And, I think each one of those books really has helped me and been impactful for me in this growth environment that we're in at Mitlin.
Brilliant. Love that. And finally, any podcasts you would recommend? Obviously, there's this one and your one, obviously. But any other podcasts that you'd recommend as good listens?
Yeah, I listen regularly to the Michael Kitchis podcast, which I was just on recently. I had the pleasure of speaking with Michael. I think that's a great podcast for learning about the profession. And then I would also say, and I'm forgetting the name of it, but if you look it up by Dr. Daniel Crosby, he's a good friend of mine, and he wrote the book recently called Soul of Wealth, which also very similar, talks a lot about behavioral finance and what the money is all about. And he has his own podcast that's sponsored by Orion, and it's an excellent and a short, like 15 or 20 minutes, but it's always chock full of great advice and ideas.
Brilliant. Larry, you've been an absolutely amazing guest. Congratulations on all your achievements already. And I know you haven't even started as far as you're concerned yet, but I think in terms of the work you do outside of work as well and inside of work, and that spreading the message of joy and happiness can only be a good thing in this world that we're in at the moment. So keep up the good work. Thank you for being a great guest.
Thanks, Tony.
Thank you for listening to High Performance Financial Advisor. If you found today's episode valuable, make sure you subscribed on your favourite podcast platform so you don't miss the next one. Until next time, keep performing.